Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Some deluded people who believe that things exist on both sides equally, all the time, in every single scenario. And of course, we know that notion to be absolutely full of you-know-what. On some issues, on some topics, it could be relatively close to the truth. But here's one topic where it's nowhere near the truth. You know what isn't happening on both sides? Public officials fleeing their political party. That seems to only be happening on one side. It seems to be a one-sided phenomenon. How many times have we done this? How many times have I made this exact video for a different instance of the same thing? Well, you guessed it. It happened again. Another Democrat councilman leaves the Democrat Party to join the GOP in the deep blue state of New York. It's undeniable we're seeing an incredible shift rightward in New York. I think there's a lot of factors at play, and we're going to talk about those in this video. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, take a look at this. New York councilman switches to GOP, faults leftist policies for surging crime rates. Democratic Party is doing everything possible in New York City to make everybody less safe. A Democratic council member from Brooklyn, New York, announced on Monday that he was dumping his party and switching to the GOP, citing surging crime rates in the city, the New York Post reported. Ari Kagan, a freshman councilman who was first elected in November 2021, blamed the Democratic Party for going too far left and implementing soft-on-crime policies that embolden criminals. Kagan, whose district includes Coney Island and parts of Brooklyn, went public with the bombshell announcement during a Monday press conference. He stated, "The Democratic Party in New York was moving to the left at such a speed I could not keep up. It's not me leaving the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party very quickly started to leave me," the councilman explained. In a Tuesday Twitter post, Kagan clarified his stance on left-wing crime policies. He noted that criminals have more rights than law-abiding citizens. Kagan stated that his positions on crime and education no longer aligned with the Democratic Party. Specifically, he cited the council's efforts to prohibit solitary confinement and legislation preventing landlords from running criminal background checks on potential tenants, the AM New York Metro reported. "I believe right now the Democratic Party is doing everything possible in New York City to make everybody less safe," said Kagan. The councilman pointed blame at the party's controversial criminal justice reform passed in 2021. "Every month I found myself like, what am I doing in the Democratic Party?" he added. "In my own district in southern Brooklyn, everywhere I knocked on doors, the people were saying, 'When are you switching to the Republican Party?'" Kagan's party affiliation switch gives the councilman a chance to challenge his former Democratic ally, Councilman Justin Brannan, in next year's general election battle to represent the new 47th district. According to Kagan, Brannan sent a text message to residents in the 47th district stating that Kagan turned his back on them. "Your councilman, Ari Kagan, just sold you out," the message allegedly read. "I never thought he would sell his soul and become a Republican," Brannan told the AM New York Metro. "Look, we all make our decisions in life. He thinks this is the best decision for him, but it's perplexing because he could just run against me in a primary. He doesn't have to become a Republican. I mean, that's a real commitment." Well, firstly, I find that quite rich that the Democrat in New York is claiming that Ari Kagan turned his back on voters, coming from these New York Democrats who have absolutely abandoned New York voters. And even worse, they've abandoned law-abiding New York citizens, law-abiding New York voters, for criminals. I mean, talk about priorities, talk about commitment. I mean, going back to Brannan's statement, what a commitment that Ari Kagan has made, committing to the Republican Party. Well, you and you Democrat clowns in New York have made a real commitment to friggin' criminals. What's worse? But something's happening here, friends. Something has been happening over the last 6 years, especially in the places that continue to go further and further left. New York seemingly is going too far. And of course, as we know, when it comes to left-wing policies, left-wing politics in general, you can never go far enough. There's never a moment of self-realization, maybe we should slow down because we're about to ride off a cliff. There's never a U-turn, no one ever uses the brakes, and they're currently flying off the edge. And that's why this is so significant. It seems to always be happening in places that are experiencing a political shift. We covered a couple situations happening in Florida, in the south of Texas, in Nevada, and now in New York. All of these places have one thing in common. They're trending rightward. You know, the electoral map that you're seeing today isn't necessarily the electoral map of tomorrow. From the Bush days to the Obama days to the Trump White House, or the Trump 2016 electoral win, and now even to the Biden win, well, moving forward, the map is constantly ever changing. The question is, what's the next place to change? change. Would I be crazy to suggest that it might be New York? People, of course, are going to say, no way, never in a million years would that ever happen. New York City is deep blue and the population is immense, but I am not buying it. Yes, of course, like most blue strongholds, the population centers and the metropolitan areas are what make it so hard to shift, but when you see what we're seeing in New York, I don't think the Manhattan area has enough power to withstand what is currently happening. And let's go straight to the governor election of 2022. I mean, here's a little bit of perspective on what I'm talking about. Look at these results. Only 300,000 votes separating Kathy Hochul and Lee Zeldin. Lee Zeldin, the total electoral underdog, but he took this race, which the Democrat was expected to win by 10 or plus points, and made it extremely competitive. And when you look at the counties, that's when you really start to see the whole picture. Look at this map. Every single county in New York shifted rightward, and not just a little bit, shifted big. Look at all of those red arrows. There's not a single blue arrow pointed towards the left. The entire state, from inland to the coast, shifting right significantly. And so that's why this New York councilman shifting to the GOP or switching parties to the GOP is so significant, because it's an indicator of a phenomenon that is likely to continue and possibly expand and grow. You know, being a Republican in New York has been unheard of. The stigma involved is massive, and that's especially true as an elected representative. Well, that stigma is slowly starting to weaken. We're moving into territory where it's no longer political suicide to identify as or to run as a Republican in the state of New York. And so this is possibly giving people confidence now all of a sudden to either switch parties or declare themselves conservatives, Republicans moving forward. Democrat policies are failing, and that's why we're seeing this political shift in the most Democrat of states. I mean, let's think about it. Republicans just won the House of Representatives in the 2022 election. Where did they flip the most congressional seats to enable that victory? How Republicans flipped 4 congressional seats in New York. Were Republicans likely to win control of the House after wins in California? In California and New York. Because politicians, leaders in California and New York have completely lost their friggin' minds. And the voters know it. Businesses, especially retail businesses and big box stores, can no longer survive in Democrat strongholds.
One of the issues we hear all the retailers talk about is what's happening with theft, with shrinkage, stuff that walks out the door. I've spoken with other retailers who have said this is a national issue, a state issue, a city-wide issue. Laws matter where these things aren't prosecuted. What's it mean to the bottom line? What would you like to see people in Washington and elsewhere do about it?
Yeah, theft is an issue. It's higher than what it's historically been, and we've got safety measures, security measures that we put in place by store location. I think local law enforcement being staffed and being a good partner is part of that equation, and that's normally how we approach it.
But there have been rules that have been changed that make it not something that the police are going to prosecute, or that the criminals won't be prosecuted below certain levels. Does that matter?
If that's not corrected over time, prices will be higher. Right. And or stores will close.
Now, they were trying to be as politically neutral as possible during that discussion. That's the Walmart CEO, by the way. But you know exactly what they were saying. Democrat cities have become an absolute disaster because of bail reform laws, because laws that are enabling shoplifting and robbery, and because of the disastrous defund the police movement. I know it's very easy to be black-pilled, to get depressed, but I think patience is key here. The pendulum is eventually going to swing. You see all these little micro moments that are adding up. Eventually, the weight is going to be too much to bear, and the whole thing is going to be set in motion in total freefall as it becomes too burdensome and too difficult to hide Democrat failures. I mean, actually, here's a great example. San Francisco building inspectors are launching an investigation into reports that Twitter has converted several office rooms at its headquarters into sleeping quarters for employees. We need to make sure that the building is being used as intended. San Francisco is more focused on harassing Elon Musk and Twitter because they're setting up sleeping quarters for people who are working overtime. Meanwhile, well, this kind of stuff exists, and people are paying attention. More and more people are waking up, and I'm really starting to think that we're going to start seeing significant political shifts in some of the most unlikely of places. All the GOP really has to start doing, first off, is playing the game just as Democrats do, if you guys know what I mean, and start actually developing a coherent message targeting the top issues that are actually affecting voters, not being absolute suckers falling for every single Democrat play and Democrat that narrative. Stick to the issues. There's a reason why the Ron DeSantis and Lee Zeldin campaigns were so successful. There's a reason why Donald Trump's 2016 run was so successful. And it's time to start taking notes. There is no excuse for the GOP to be underperforming. The environment favors Republicans. You just got to be able to grasp that opportunity. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. I'm going to get out of here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.